We used to have a lot of political back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. We would accuse our colleagues on the other side of the aisle of being tax and spend Democrats. Well, they were tax and spend Democrats. But then something changed along the way, and we stopped debating tax policy for the most part. And now everybody in this chamber, for the most part, are spend and spend members of Congress. Spend and spend members of a uniparty. And look, I'm all on board with the enthusiasm and the unity and the energy coming out of last week that we're going to transform this institution. I believe it. I believe by offering amendments in the appropriations process on the floor of this body will be better. I believe that by having 72 hours to read bills and not waiving that rule, that we actually do it, that will be better. I believe that by having single subject bills, without them being multi-subject and complicated and thousands of pages, that will be better. I believe that by requiring amendments to be germane, that is actually related to the underlying purpose of the amendment of the underlying bill, that will be better. Those are all things that will make us better. But they will only make us better if we're all united in the purpose of what we're trying to do. I know I've got very strong disagreements with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I have significant disagreements with a lot of my friends on my side of the aisle. But you'll never solve those disagreements if you never sit it down at the table and work. The only way to work is to put some sort of constraint on our spending. So with all due respect to my friend from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, with whom I agree about mandatory spending and about having to solve those problems in the long term, discretionary spending matters. Discretionary spending matters because it charts the priorities of a Congress that represents the American people. We have to make the tough choices on discretionary spending. And oh, by the way, that they are only 20 or 25% of the overall spending does not mean that they're not insignificant. If we do not balance our budget right now and chart a course to balance that budget over the next 10 years, we will spend an additional $10 trillion over the next 10 years that we don't have. But what will happen is, and here's what's going to happen. This is important for the American people to understand. We reached an agreement as a party last week to ensure that we return to 22 levels of spending. That is a top-line level of $1.471 trillion. That we operate with that cap in spending. That says nothing about what the levels are for defense or non-defense discretionary, just that we would cap at 22 levels of spending. But here's what will happen. We'll have a debate about that. We'll pass some appropriations bills. If we do our job as Republicans, we'll pass good, solid bills for this year's spending that stick within those caps, that stay under the 22 levels of spending. We'll send them to the Senate. And Chuck Schumer will say, with all sorts of wailing and gnashing of teeth, that we are taking food out of the mouths of orphans and babies, and that we're undermining the ability of people to survive and live, and taking away their medicine, and we're killing people and doing all sorts of horrible things. And as a result, it'll be September, and we won't have an agreement, and then there'll be some brinkmanship and a bunch of politics and a bunch of messaging and speeches, and then there'll be a continuing resolution that fund government at the current levels that were passed in December under that $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill that was passed on December 23rd using Christmas as a backstop. That's almost certainly what's going to happen if we don't stop it. There are two ways to stop it. Democrats and Republicans sit down and work honestly around a table to stop it, or brinkmanship, forcing the question by bringing it to the brink. Those are the two possible ways that you try to stop what I just described from occurring. This is the reality of what we've got to change in this body. What else is going to happen? Come summer, sometime undetermined, usually chosen by the executive branch as the maximum moment to be able to extract some sort of pain on the body, we will be told that the debt limit is going to be reached. That might be May or June or July or August. And then we'll be told you must raise the debt ceiling. And if any of us say, wait a minute, why are we going to raise the debt ceiling if we don't stop doing the things that's causing us to accumulate more debt? If any of us dare to say that, what will happen? Oh my, and that's already happening. The Wall Street Journal and all of the bond traders and stock traders on Wall Street, all of the investment bankers, all of the brilliant economists, all of the opposing political party will all say, don't default on the debt. You can't default on the debt. So don't you dare demand that we actually change the things we are doing that are causing the debt, because we might default on the debt. So let's keep spending money we don't have, keep accumulating more debt, increasing our interest payments, making it more difficult to service that debt, while we undermine our own fiscal accountability, our own bond ratings in the future. But no, don't you dare, Congressman Roy, say that you might use the debt ceiling as leverage to extract fiscal reforms to stop the insanity. Well, let me just be clear. I think it is critical that we change the way we're doing business, and I intend to use the debt ceiling to ensure that we get fiscal and structural reforms. And I'm not going to bow down just because a few of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and a few pundits on TV write nasty editorials, and some of my donors, some of the people out there in the world and activists text you and go, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're going to risk default on the debt. You know why I'm not going to do that? Because it's my job not to back down when people are afraid of what we're supposed to do here. What we're supposed to do is bring things to a decision in this body responsibly. All last week while we were debating the speaker, a whole bunch of my friends, supporters, financial supporters, were blowing up my phone with text messages. A whole lot of them were saying, attaboy, stand up, fight for the American people, change the institution. Let us actually try to make this place work rather than continuing down this road of destruction. But a whole bunch of them were also texting me saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? We're not going to have a Republican speaker. What are you doing? You're going to undermine us. We're going to get a Democrat speaker. You guys look like clowns. What are you doing? You look ridiculous. You're making the Republican Party look ridiculous, Chip. Stop doing it. Come Friday, after 15 votes, we come to a conclusion. Nobody died. Nothing went crazy. We got a Speaker of the House. We got some agreements among all of us about how the body should proceed, about ensuring we open it up, have transparency, offer more amendments, get greater ideological diversity among the committees. Let's have a real debate on these things. Get a really strong committee on the Judiciary Committee, a church-style committee to look at how government's acting. That's what we got by standing up and fighting and ignoring all of the hand-wringers who can't stand the heat. Or stated differently, all of the hand-wringers out there in the Chamber of Commerce crowd and the donor class who basically want us to do their bidding so they can get richer. That's the truth. Don't default on the debt. That might hurt my financial bottom line, Chip. Don't you dare rattle and have debates on the House floor that might rock the boat, because my boat's pretty good, Chip. I'm doing quite well. Well, there's a whole hell of a lot of people in this country who are not doing well. And I'm not here to represent the donor class. I'm not here to represent the talking heads. I'm here to represent every hardworking American across this country, and particularly in my district, who are sick of the direction of this country. So I am glad that we had the debate we had last week. I am glad that we captivated the American people's attention. I'm glad that C-SPAN was free to show the conversation in the debates. I'm glad that we did something we hadn't done in 100 years, because it's the two-party system entrenched that has broken down the ability of members of this body to actually be members. That's actually our job. Putting politics and partisan politics aside, it's our job as individual members of this body to come here and do our job. It's not our job, for example, to get on a committee and say and do whatever the chairman of the committee says, which, by the way, is one of the things that happens in this town. Our job is to get on the committee and work, debate, put good bills on the floor, amend those bills, debate those bills, pass some of those bills. It's also not a race to introduce bills. It's not a race to pass bills. What would be wrong if we only passed about 30 bills this whole Congress? Would that be a bad thing? What if we only passed the 12 appropriations bills, did our job, sent them to the Senate, passed a handful of bills that would actually make our country better, and then just sat back and worked a little bit and talked a little bit, rather than running down to the desk to file another bill, to introduce another statement, to do another press conference, to then run around and say, "Whoa, we got to pass a messaging bill. Oh, this is such and such week. This is the week for police officers, or this is the week for breast cancer awareness, or this is the week for whatever somebody in the Hallmark industry decided the week is for." Oh, well, we got to pass a bill. Why? You think we lack laws? You think we lack regulations? You think we need to spend more money that we don't have? Why don't we just stop? Pause. My message to my Republican colleagues is the best thing we can do for our country is stop doing all the things that this body has been doing for as long as I can remember. So whatever this body has been doing, let's do the opposite. How about that? How about we actually have this chamber full like it was last week? Why don't we have hundreds of people on the floor and debate issues in front of each other? Why don't we pick a day like Tuesday and call that debate day? And we have 50 members from one side and 50 members from the other side. Let's debate Ukraine in full view of the American people.